of AIARE's Tuesday night education series. We're really excited to be able to offer this free resource to the public. Tonight's topic is building your terrain catalog, which is a big focus of the AIARE Level 1. We talk a lot about how to build a terrain catalog, and we're going to actually just talk about what that really means. Really excited to have Marc Chauvin from CalTopo here. Marc is a guide and has worked as an area instructor, and so great to have an educator's perspective on this. And then we also have Meghan Twohig from CalTopo, and Meghan will be here to answer some questions, including some, if you have more technical questions about the CalTopo product, she can answer those as well. So one last housekeeping note before we jump in. Just want to let folks know that this session is being recorded. You probably heard the robot voice tell you that as you logged on, but just want to make sure everybody's aware that we're being recorded. Only the folks whose faces you see right now will appear in the video when it goes onto YouTube. And we won't use names when we answer questions from folks, but just so you know, you're consenting to being part of a recorded webinar that's going to go up on YouTube later. So I'm going to give folks just a couple more seconds to finish filling out that poll if you haven't had a chance already. Looks like most folks already have. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marc. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll just be here in the background and take it away, Marc. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Emma. Thanks for attending, everybody. We're really excited about this clinic. I'm Marc, as Emma has said, Marc Chauvin. I'll be working the audio and visual part of this clinic. In the chat's going to be Meghan Twohig. She'll be answering questions. Meghan is really the face of CalTopo. She does social media, marketing, writes in the user guide, and that pretty much describes her morning. You'll see how we all do quite a bit of different things. I'm tech support at CalTopo. My previous career was mountain guiding. I'm an IFMGA mountain guide, and I taught lots of AIARE avalanche courses in my guiding career. Just a brief little intro about CalTopo, the application. It's a mapping application. It's both web-based and has a mobile app. We're a small company. We have 12 people, so you can see why I was saying that's Meghan's morning. And that includes our founder, Matt Jacobs. It was started by Matt to solve mapping issues in search and rescue. And then it soon spread to the recreational community, and that's how I first got introduced to CalTopo, was way back when I was looking for a mapping application. The SAR pedigree gave us a really strong focus on collaboration when creating a map, and then syncing data from the web to the mobile app. So the way this clinic is going to work, Meghan and Emma will be in the chat. Meghan will be answering any specific CalTopo questions. If there's any AIARE questions, you can ask Emma. And I'll be demonstrating the skills. I'll be like the on-screen. You'll see my cursor. We expect to leave 20-25 minutes for Q&A. And Meghan and Emma will be curating those questions for the end. So post questions in the chat as soon as you have them. So that way they can have a list of questions and we can go over those questions at the end. Meghan's going to provide a pro trial. The pro trial for CalTopo will be pretty important. You'll see why in just a second. She's also going to provide a map link for you so that you can actually see the same map that I'm seeing. And you can, we'll talk more about the map, but to activate 3D, if you're not a pro subscriber, you should activate the pro trial so you can use 3D on the map. I'm gonna start here. Let me share my screen here. And everybody should be seeing my screen. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a terrain catalog on a map, and we're going to start from information. Now, I got this information from the AIARE online course on their section about terrain catalog and planning and advanced planning and that stuff. And this is a photo in this photo right here is a photo taken by Benja Glass, who's a guide in the Tetons. And I saw this photo and I was like, oh, this is going to be perfect. Let me like build this out on the map. If you're ever looking for a splitboard guide, get in touch with Benja, by the way. Really, really good splitboarder. So anyway, I'm gonna first, you should be seeing my map viewer on to my left of the screen here. And I'm just gonna give you a quick rundown of just a rough, so you can manipulate the map at the map link that Meghan has put in the chat. So up here, you have a drop down. These are different map layers. And we'll be using two primarily, Map Builder Topo and this global imagery. Down below, there's actually overlays that go on top of the map. And the main one we're going to be using is slope angle shading, but we'll also later on be dealing with the avalanche forecast layer. On this side, these are the objects that I've put on the map. This is the left side of the screen, and it's our objects menu. And that's where you're going to be able to toggle things on and off, lines, polygons, and things of that nature. All right. So the first thing I had to do when I saw this photo was I had to kind of locate its perspective. The Grand Teton is pretty obvious. And I've been here in the summertime. I actually climbed Mount Twohig, which is this peak right here. So I had a rough idea of where this was. And so I tried to locate it on the map and the perspective. And this binoculars marker here, what I did is clicked on a few places, but I finally ran into this place right here, and I right click on that spot and I click the simulated view. And the simulated view is sort of an enhanced 3D, if you will, from the point of view that it's sort of like a street view. You can go around and as if you're spinning around. And I'm gonna put it into imagery, and I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and you'll see it is virtually identical to the photo. And so what I started to do, I can zoom out just a little bit. What I started to do was locate spots that are on the photo to kind of locate them on the map. And so there's this big avoid section. And there was this drainage that's kind of has a bunch of bumps on it. So I was able to say, well, there's the drainage and this is the avoid section. And on our simulated view, I can just click that spot and it'll say map this spot, opens up a map, and I can zoom in. And the center of the screen is that spot. And so I'm going to expand this, get rid of the photo. I'm going to get rid of that map that opened. I'll keep the simulated view open in case I need it later. But this is the map that you have the map link of, and I put 2 reference points on it. So I'm going to click on 3D. You have 3D controls here at the bottom. It's basically you press the control button on a Mac and then start mousing around. And these were my 2 spots. These were my locations that I could, and that started giving me some perspective on the map and where to start drawing lines. Now I could have used 3D. I used the simulated view. I like using that. Or I could have just used the map. The other thing you can do is sometimes you can import the photo directly into CalTopo and it will locate itself if it has location data on it, right where that photo was taken from. And that takes care of all the. Now I embedded this photo into the map. So I have the photo in the map. It's attached to those binoculars. And the first thing I did was I started drawing in the up track. So let me put that. So it was this up track that I was first interested in. Now you'll notice as I put the up track in, I added a lot more zigzags. And the reason for that is I want to get accurate distance. So if I click on the line that I've drawn and I click on profile, you'll see as I drag my cursor along the line, a dot will move on the track itself. And what I was focused on was drawing the line such that I was staying under here. That was the steepest section, but I was staying under between 35 and 40% grade. So roughly a 20-25 degree skin track. So as I was drawing it, I was editing it and checking the profile and making sure to keep it that. Primarily not to actually, this isn't where I'm going to turn. This isn't going to be super accurate, but I want to get an idea of the true length of the line. So that way I know the actual distance. Now, if I click on the line again, I can click travel time. This is based on the Munter rate, and you can see it's estimating on an upski 2.3 hours. Now, if I look at Benja's notes, it's like weave through the old growth trees, on and on. Takes about 2 hours to ascend, a total of 2,000 feet. So on the profile itself, you'll see I went up 2,065 feet. And the travel time estimates just a little over 2 hours. So I feel like I've got a pretty good, accurate portrayal of what Benja was describing in that photo. The next thing I drew is this run the tree's knees. And I'm going to talk about the gap here in a little bit. But the tree's knees, like I wanted to draw that line in because that's on the photo and I wanted to get a good, accurate representation of where that is as well. Then the other thing I drew in was the no-go zone. So what Benja did was he put like a polygon here and said avoid, and then put big X marks. So I sort of put the X marks in there just to kind of relate directly to the photo. But really, I prefer just putting a polygon. I use black and I just name it avoid. So this is an area to avoid. So I'm going to just uncheck those no-go X's. That was just to kind of give you an idea of like duplicating the photo itself. So right now, except for the run down from the summit of Twohig, I've got pretty much the entire photo into the map. And so now it's my turn to start like tweaking things a little bit. So one thing I noticed is I thought, wow, if I could get an up track up here and avoid this zone here that looks pretty steep, I'll click on slope angle shading. You'll see the slope angle here. This is a pretty steep little pitch right here, and you might be able to get up here. But I thought if I could zigzag my way up here and cut in, that might make it for a good up track. So I created the tree's knees alternative track. And you'll notice I gave it a different color. And that different color is just to denote it's not directly off the map. The other thing I did is this upper part looked interesting to me. It didn't look all that steep, at least up to the crest here. And looking at the global image in 3D, toggle that to 100%, it looked like thin enough trees to ski through. So I added the Twohig upper part and I went pretty high up onto that ridge. Who knows how high you go? This is all like speculation. And again, I'll do a profile. I kept it in that range of 35, 40%. It climbs an extra 1,000 feet. I'll shut that off and adds roughly an hour and 15 minutes to the up track if I were to come up that. So that's just a little bit more tweaking, like looking at the terrain, getting a sense of where things go. I also added some other avoid areas. So Benja says the tree's knees track to the ascender's right works best, avoids the gully prone to avalanches on looker's left. So this is, to me, what he was talking about. And when I spin this around, I'll probably toggle that off. You can see it's kind of a ugly looking terrain trap-like thing. And I can toggle back and you can see it's got pretty steep sides. And to me, that just looked like a place to avoid. So I added that to my avoid list. And now what I want to talk about is that gap that I have in this descent route and this rollover. What's interesting is, and one of the things I used to teach people is if you're doing moderate terrain where you're staying out of avalanche terrain for the most part, and you see an area where the terrain rolls out of sight, a rollover, that generally means you're getting into avalanche terrain at that rollover. And if you look, you can actually see that on this 3D. This has got high definition LiDAR elevation, and you can actually see the terrain like disappears. And as I spin around and add slope shading, you can see the slope shading also shows it as a pretty steep chunk of terrain. So I decided to add a decision point here so I can figure out which way I'm going to go. It also helps remind me to take a look on my way up if I'm going up this track. And it's also a reminder that there's some terrain here I need to get around if I decide to go up. Now, Ben just says stay to the right, but that looks pretty steep. So it may be worth deking to the left a little bit and then up, but there's that avoid zone. So it's like kind of come up here. I don't know. All I know is I don't know. So those are going to be decisions that are going to need to be ground truthed. So the final thing was Benja's line down Twohig, which would be a really good ski if you could catch it. I got a feeling it doesn't come in all the time, and you gotta kind of be lucky or live there. But this is another one where I saw a big, what looked like a terrain trap to me here as well. And you can look at it on the way down. And so I drew the line out of that. Benja's line, we lose its view right there. So somewhere right in here, I figure we're losing the view. So I had to speculate a little bit. And if looking at the map, if I were going to be skiing down this looks like how I would exit. So I know that was kind of quick. I didn't go over like how to press buttons and drag and make lines. We have a user guide that will explain all that. What I wanted to focus on is this idea of getting information, in this case, in the form of a photo, and then overlaying it onto one of these very modern digital maps. Boy, did I wish I had this when I first started guiding. And just to give you an idea, old school, I'm gonna click off 3D here. This is what a map with a north aspect, so excuse me, a north orientation on a flat, just like a little bit of hill shading would look like of the same area. And you can see the 3D really allows you to get a good visualization of the terrain, especially where there's LiDAR. So what I want to get into now, just a little, is once you have this terrain catalog, what do you do when you're gonna like actually come touring here? Like you're gonna go check these things out. You'll see I did some line styling. That line styling goes away when you go into 3D on CalTopo. It's just the line styling gets a little wonky when you create that 3D. So what I wanted to do is what happens when you go on a tour. Well, one of the nice things you get to do in CalTopo is get some up-to-date data, forecast data. So if I right-click here, I can click on this NOAA forecast. And get that spot weather forecast. The other thing I can do, I'm going to just drop out of 3D so it's not quite as wow when I do this, because it does pull back. I'm going to click the avalanche forecast. And that gives me the forecast zones. And what's nice about this is some areas, Colorado in particular, has dynamic forecast zones. So we import those dynamic forecast zones as they change. This area doesn't have the dynamic forecast zones. And if I click here and I click get the forecast, I'll get brought to the Bridger Teton forecast page for that date for today. And I get the forecast. Now, what I like to do is get that information and add it as unattached photos to my map. And so I've got the danger rating, the problems, the discussion, and the avalanche forecast, weather forecast, along with the NOAA spot weather forecast. And that's all input onto the map. So I'm going to toggle the avalanche forecast off and zoom in just so I don't have this funky orange color. I'm going to toggle on the 3D. I'm going to rotate the map so we get a kind of a good view of it. And I want to just cover a few things, a few of the tools I used. So in the map layers, I used Map Builder Topo, and I used global imagery. In our overlays, my primary one was slope angle shading, but one I didn't toggle on that sometimes can be really helpful is by putting contours on the global imagery. I also use the avalanche forecast. I right-clicked and I used simulated view. I used the NOAA forecast. And I was importing photos. One was attached to this waypoint because that's where I wanted the simulated view. And then the others are unattached that give me forecast information, both weather and avalanche. And I know from an AIARE perspective, you want to write down the avalanche forecast and all that. That's really important. It helps you remember it. But I also like to have the entire forecast so I can read it like there's no memory or weird thing happen where like I wrote the wrong thing down or something like that. So I like putting it on the map itself. So this whole map will sync to my phone, and I'll have this data on a map on my phone that will geolocate me, GPS. Now, the final thing before we turn it over to questions is if you want a copy of this map so that you can manipulate it, draw more things on it, play with it, on the map link, open the map link, click export, click the drop down, copy to a new map, and then click export, and it will actually create a new map that you can name, that's yours, that you can write on and do things with. Now, if I had friends, if there were friends of mine who we were going to go to this area together, I could give them a share link where we could work on the same map together. They could add things and delete things and put things on, and we can collaborate together to create a map of a trip that we're going on together, even if we're continent apart. And that's part of our collaborative mapping. Anyway, that's my time that I allotted myself to kind of go through the process. I really hope there's some good questions. I know there's good questions. I really hope there's a lot of good questions out there. And let's see, I don't know. I guess I turn it over to Megan at this point.
Yeah, there is a couple good questions, and we did leave a lot of time for Q&A. So if you have questions about CalTopo, questions for how Marc uses it, how he thinks about it as like a guide and an Navi educator, now's the time to drop those in, because we really wanted to have a lot of time for you guys to get, those burning questions out here and answered by somebody with Marc's kind of background. So there's a couple I'd love for you to tackle, Marc. The first is about, is there a way to visualize elevation bands within CalTopo?
Elevation bands.
Yeah, so like, 3,500 to 5,500 feet, 5,500 to 6,500 feet. Because, often, especially like Abby forecast, you're looking at, below, at, above tree line kind of stuff. So is there a way to do that within CalTopo?
Yeah, I believe I'm still screen sharing. Is that
Yep, you
correct,
are.
Meghan?
Yes,
Okay.
you are.
We have a custom DEM shading layer here. And this user interface is going to change dramatically really soon. It'll be a little bit easier to deal with. But if you want to go elevation between, let's say 7,000 feet to, let's just put it at 10,000 feet. I'm going to put both colors as red. I'm going to add the rule. I'll just call this 7 to 10. And hit save. That will color all aspects between 7,000 feet and 10,000 feet, the color red. If that wasn't what you were expecting or you were looking at for something else, let us know in the chat. But the way I understood the question, it's our add custom DEM shading, and that you can actually categorize it by slope angle, the aspect, and the elevation, and colorize what you want. And this is used for everything from finding flat terrain for campsites to finding moderate terrain to ski to visualizing zones so you get an idea of like where the zone is.
Yep, that was exactly what that attendee was looking for. So thank you. Yeah, and slope angle shading, what we display in the app is just a custom DEM layer. That's all it is. We're telling the program to call out, different groups of slope angles at different colors. Next question for you, Mark. Could you talk a little bit more about how to import a picture with GPS data?
Okay, so importing a photo with GPS data is pretty straightforward in that you don't have to know it has GPS data. The program will tell you. So if I click add photo and I click a photo, and this may take a few seconds because it takes a while for it to go in. The photo, I'm also in Mexico, but my internet's pretty good. Like it's really good here. I wasn't really surprised. I know like it's good internet here. It's warm though. The coordinates will automatically populate the coordinate box. And when I click OK, I'm going to get out of global imagery here. It'll geolocate that photo right home area. So there's the photo. And I'll just do it real quick. We got simulated view, imagery. And let's bring up the photo again. You can, I'll blow it up this way. And if you look at that and compare it to that. There's my original. Geez, they're right. The tabs are right next to each other and I'm still lost. Okay, there you go. And so it'll just geolocate itself. If it has metadata with the information in it.
Awesome. All right. And next question. I'm gonna try to. I'm kind of also strategically asking these in order. So if you haven't heard yours yet, I see it, and we will get to it. So the next question is actually about travel time. You showed how you can click on a line and show the estimated travel time based on the Munter rate. Question is there a way to tune the estimated travel time to match an individual's speed?
Yeah, there is, and it's actually really good. For me, the travel time is a great way to like quick estimate, like when I'm drawing lines and building things. But for instance, and you can do, it's a pretty robust feature. So it would take me a while, but let me just show you like a quick basic. If with the pro subscription, if you click travel time and then click travel plan, you get a travel plan. So I've got a travel plan of the entire line. Okay. And then here you can do custom and you can add your up Munter rate, your flat Munter rate, or down Munter rate. Now, to just give you an idea of the power of this, let's say I want to end a leg here before it starts getting steep. I can add a marker. And let's say, okay, it's really steep and I'm going to start booting. So I'm going to go start booting. And I'm going to go 10 minutes for the transition and go okay. Now, when I click on that and get travel time, I have like my weight, my coordinates and points. Then it takes me 49 minutes to get to start booting. I break for 10 minutes and goes to the end to 2 hours and 24 minutes. I can change it to ski and you'll see that that will. Yeah, that it doesn't change it because it's only an up track. Or I can go to custom and I can go 5, 7, and my down will be 12, although it's moot. And you can see my time changes here, but by putting 10 minutes in the comments, it actually creates the transition for me. And then you can print this plan. You can add details to your route, right? And then you can generate that. You can create it as a PDF. And then you can add that PDF to your map as an unattached photo, and you have your travel plan on your map. Wow, that went pretty. I hadn't practiced that, so that was like without having done it in a few weeks. So
Yeah, and if you're new to CalTopo, like just clicking on the line, like Mark showed earlier, would give you the travel time based on the Monterey, which is used by mountain guides to estimate, you know, travel through non-technical terrain based on travel mode, takes into account elevation as well as distance. So that would be like the simplest way to start. Just get a general estimation. If you wanted to start going down that rabbit hole, like Mark just showed, and using Travel Plan, which is a pro feature, you could go that far, but you don't have to. It's just a great option to have. Next question for you is someone in their Area 1 course, my instructors use CalTopo, and one layer they praise was sun exposure. That shows where the sun will hit the snow at different times of day. Can you demonstrate how to use this feature? Also, is this feature adjusted for the sun's changing location in the sky during the course of the year?
Okay, so the sun, there's kind of two ways to get sun exposure. So you can click the sun exposure, and yes, you can get it, you know, by month here. So today, it's February, or what it would look like.
It is now February. It felt like January went on for forever, but it's now February.
Yeah, and you can go by time. This is east facing, so in August, it's probably starting to go in the shade at 5. Wow.
Can you
And
just
that
explain
gives
the
you an
colors, Mark?
idea. Excuse
Mark,
me?
can you explain the colors?
So yellow is the sun, blue is shade, and then when it's all blue like that, it's pretty much darkness. Now that's one way. That's the sun exposure by month and time. The other thing you can do is use the measure tool. Click sun exposure. Click a spot on the map. And now you'll see the date populates in the upper left. And this is based on your computer's time. So if you're in the East Coast planning for a West Coast trip, you have to adjust that time, or adjust your clock on your computer and it'll adjust that time for you. So this is what time zone the computer is set at. And you can see darkness to light to shade to darkness all through the season, or all through the year. And so you can get sort of a point and what that sunshade looks like, instead of a big generalized area like the sun exposure gives you. So there's two ways to check out when something is going to be in the sun and shade and at what time.
Great, thank you. Another question for you is what can you look for in the slope shading? What can you look for in the slope shading to steer clear of on higher risk days? If you have mostly yellow shaded slope, how much orange or red do you have to look out for? For example, is one small orange band enough to worry about? What slope shading is good for skiing? So kind of
Wow.
how do you use this layer with the Abbey forecast and what you're concerned about? And then how do you also use it in terms of like being able to find some good skiing?
Yeah. Okay. Now the rubber hits the road here. Okay. So let me start with the fact that this is map data. And yes, we are getting really good digital elevation models, LiDAR. This is really good stuff. Like, you look at the detail in this is really awesome, but it is not reality. So that's number one. Two, when you're looking at small slopes that could avalanche, that are steep enough to avalanche, they may be all right to ski in elevated. It's hard to find a word that's not low, moderate, high, considerable, high, or extreme. Elevated avalanche. But like, if you're in a high danger rating and you've got to watch out for overhead hazards, so your angle isn't everything. So there's a lot to parse through that. But if you're looking at small slopes and you're thinking, is this reasonable to ski? My go-to, if everything else being equal, I'm not worried about overhead hazards. I'm not worried about remote triggering those overhead hazards. I'm just worried about these, I don't want to call them micro features, but not like these big features, is what's survivability? And can you do them one at a time? So is there a terrain trap? So when I'm looking at like this rollover here, right? It flattens out, but it doesn't completely flatten out for a ways. I would really like to get eyeballs on this to see if this slope would build a deep burial here. This isn't huge. Benja, it says you avoid most of the avalanche hazard, but when you slope angle shade this, like you're in the red, and this is LiDAR, so it's fairly accurate. So you're getting in that zone. Like, what's the survivability? And that's why I put a decision point there, because not only do you have to make a decision, but you probably should be skiing this one at a time and setting up off to the side a little bit in case other skiers in your party were to get involved in an avalanche. It is always better to avoid avalanches, but it is mandatory to avoid unsurvivable avalanches. And so if you're out there recreating, when you're starting to look at smaller slopes, you need to think in terms of survivability. So avalanche rescue, one at a time, with a plan, and in reasonable conditions. And for me, that's what this kind of slope angle shading does when it's kind of modeled like that. M-O-T-T-L-E, modeled. I can sort of get a sense of like areas that maybe I might want to go around, and rollovers and things that I can't avoid. I can sort of make sure I think about them first. I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's definitely more detail than a mountain guide usually would give you. How's that?
That was great. And actually kind of building off that, you mentioned, this slope angle shading being based on LiDAR. Can you talk about like the two different, the different sources of elevation data that you can have for slope angle shading?
Yeah, when there is a significant difference between like LiDAR data and our ability to show angle and non-LiDAR areas. I wish I had numbers off the top of my head. I know AJ said he might be in the audience here. But let's go to
Are you talking about resolution?
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
so like traditional data sets tend to be 10 to 30 meter horizontal resolution. So you can think of a 10 meter by 10 meter square up to a 30 meter by 30 meter square. Whereas, LiDAR tends to be 1 meter by 1 meter or better than that.
So here's Canada, where they're, at this point, I don't believe we have any LiDAR in Canada. Hopefully we will sooner rather than later. And immediately upon looking at this, you can just see we're not able to see the detail that we could see in the Tetons. And you can see the pixelation. So you can get a sense of how big each pixel actually is by looking at the edges. And here, bigger pixel, bigger grain of salt. How's that? You compare that to where we were. My zoom to extend isn't working because I'm all the way in New Hampshire with my photo. Yeah. I think it's that one. I'm going to delete it. Just to give you an idea, like when you're far away, like I went to Rogers Pass, one of the things you can do with CalTopo is click this area right here, and it'll zoom to extent. So it'll include, it's a little bit easier to see when you do it without 3D on. If I click zoom to extent, it just brings you into the area and it encompasses all your map objects. Because I had put a map object off in New Hampshire, it just brought me into the whole country. So zoom to extent. Anyway, back on it. If you look at the detail here of the LiDAR, like you can see like the underlying bed surface, like the detail is pretty good. And let's just compare it again to Rogers Pass. Like, it's just not as like it's not as fine grained, and it's less trustworthy because you can kind of bury a 30-foot cliff in there somewhere.
And our founder always gets mad when we say that, but it's a great way of illustrating, I think, the difference in resolution between different data sources. As Mark's been saying, it's still just a model, but one model works with better data, higher resolution data. The other model works with lower resolution data. So it is good to know where, that data is coming from. And actually, Mark, if you, in the search bar, go to McNamee Peak, I'll spell it for you. There's a great border there. I think that's really powerful. So McNamee. And then Peak in Colorado. There's a border between high resolution and high resolution LiDAR data and lower resolution older data sets there. So you can even see them side by side at that point. And that's somewhere you can go to.
Yeah, I'm there now.
Yeah, so as we get our elevation data, we're updating it with LiDAR data for the continental United States from the USGS 3DEP program. So as more data becomes available, we import it. And that is something we do announce, on our social media, through our mailer. So we're continually updating that elevation data as it becomes more available. Mark, I've got another question for you. Is there the ability to show satellite imagery of snow or glacier cover?
Oh, thank you for asking that.
That was anonymous attendee. So thank you, anonymous.
Because that was supposed to be in my 25 minutes of talking, and I did miss that. So here, let me zoom to extent again. And your real-time data, your avalanche forecast, your weather forecast, I should say your forecast data and your real-time data, those things. The other thing you can get from CalTopo is Sentinel imagery. And it looks like it was cloudy. There we go. And I'll put it into 3D because it kind of pulls things out. And it's not like the kind of thing you're going to see like high res, like you won't likely see ski tracks. I'm going to start closing off some of these things so you can just see the big overview. But this will show you snow coverage on the 29th, 2025. Now, in some areas, I don't know if we'll get a cloudy day here. Let's just see. But you can like scroll back and you can start seeing like the differences. Oh, it's taking a little long to populate. A lot of bandwidth here that we're using. But let's just see what it looks like on the 14th of November. And you can start seeing that there's less snow coverage. And let's go the 24th. But you'll start getting cloud cover on certain times. But this is really helpful in the spring meltdown or early season, and you get to see the snowfall. Oh, there's a try that first of 19th. Let's go back to you can see if you're zoomed in and you hit a cloudy day, it just looks like a blank screen. It's actually not blank. And 3D is helpful. It's going to take a while to populate. I'm clicking around a lot. But you get to see from Sentinel Weekly the snow cover.
Yeah,
Other ways of doing it is you can look at weather stations and get here. Let me make sure I'm picking up snowpack here. Yeah, great. "78-inch snow depth." It's not pulling up the chart though. Oh, there it is. And you can get snow depth. Sometimes these things like this is weird. This is like obviously like something went kablooey in their measurement system. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, but you get good data as to the snow depth at points. And just to give you an idea, in the United States, I'm going to get out of the weekly here, go to Map Builder Topo. That's a great little spot right there. That's a good observation site. I like that. This must be, yeah, I was going to say this must be the ski area. They got 82 inches. 63 inches here. So you can, here at the ski area, you get a good idea based on elevation. And so that's another way to get snow totals. One is visual. So it helps you understand a little bit about wind-blown areas and stuff like that. And the other one is direct observation from weather stations.
Yeah, and I'll just make a lot of people like planning ski tours and winter travel. You know, the global imagery shows summertime shots. But if you want to plan it with snow and like winter shots, that Sentinel Weekly is really great because this time of year, obviously, hopefully, it's showing snow. And it can help you get in that mindset. And even more than just your normal winter imagery, it's showing you recent conditions. So you can go back in time, because that Sentinel Weekly is updated every 5 days, and you can see cloud cover does get in the way sometimes, but you can always go back in time and find a more recent imagery without clouds in the way. Unless you live in the PNW, and then it might be a little trickier. But you can still find days.
Awesome. Thanks for all the great questions, everybody. I learned a lot. Mark, that was
Oh,
awesome. And Megan, thanks for moderating. This was great. It's always really fun to see a lot of questions from folks. That brings us right up to our time. So